Okay, this is a response to tarot tips. Somebody, or Kathy Bo, I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Uh, what really struck me about what you put out here is the things that you said that be interested in hear tips you would hear. Let's see, about tips for someone who's beginning, and things that I wish somebody would have told me when I started. I learned very early that as you know, I started looking at these books, that books had different points of view. And when I started talking to people, some people say, "Oh, don't read a book at all. Just use the cards." And I wouldn't advise that myself. But it was interesting. There were people who had the total other end of the spectrum. You know, there's really nothing mystical going on. It's just all psychology and what the cards represent. And then you had varying degrees in between. And the point that I'm making is, you as somebody mentioned, you want to find out what resonates with you. I say listen to everybody, but only accept what you feel works for you. And keep in mind that that can change. There was a time when I started off, I said, I've heard that not every reader reverses their cards. It complicates the reading. I'm not reversing my cards, and I don't think I ever will. And I was happy with that, but then I started to see some problems in my reads, and I started to see a lot of things repeating, and I started to realize that maybe it was time for me to explore reversing the cards then. So whatever you're doing now, and however you're comfortable doing it as a beginner, allow yourself to change. It's a growth process. So you're going to want to play with things, and once you start getting good enough for reading for other people, if you're going to play with an idea, let them know that you're playing with an idea. I did a thing online here once where I did some what I called speed reads, which is funny because my new hero, I'd scratch. I don't take. I don't. I want to scratch it. I won't say he's not my hero. But let's say somebody I'm very impressed with, who I'm looking at. His name is Nick Dutch, and Nick Dutch, what I call speed tarot reading, he does by nature. He's just very fluid. And just real quick, I don't believe you should put the word hero on anyone other than the person you see in the mirror, because no one should have to live up to that expectation. But I digress. Other tips about tarot: expect that people will let you down. Expect that the field, anything involving supernatural, occult, is going to attract some wackos. And then there's, so you just got to be careful who you depend on for information, for leadership, and anyone at any level. It's your journey, and when other people let you down, that's not a reflection on you. That's a reflection on them. And that's bound to happen at some point. The other things, see, as I'm looking back at my, because I'm still learning myself. I've been at this for about a year. I've come to it very strangely. But don't be afraid that if you don't feel like reading, to just not read. If you got to leave it for a while, for whatever reasons you might have in your life, that's fine. You can always come back to it. And in my experience, it tells me when to come back, and it tells me when to leave it alone. I wish somebody would have explained to me a better interaction between reading the cards and using intuition. And there again, you have people across the spectrum. Some people say, I don't just lay the cards down and just use your intuition. And to me, the whole purpose of tarot is that the cards tell a story. At the same time, I've had to learn the hard way. Well, I'll explain it this way. At first, I noticed that every time I didn't follow the cards, and I got a little confused on something, or I didn't believe the cards that I should have. Then when I got real comfortable trusting the cards, then they started to betray me. And this was along the lines, I think, too, of only reading them upright, and a few other things may have been involved. But I got to a point where I realized, particularly in one book I read, it said sometimes the cards are just going to come up crazy. Well, that's when, for me, intuition kicks in. When I noticed that when I first started focusing on something that didn't make sense, I would focus and kind of meditate for a moment, and then the sense of it would come. And then I realized sometimes that sense of it that came to me had nothing to do with the cards. So it's an interplay, almost a dance, sort of a Tai Chi. I say Tai Chi because that's the proper term. Yin Yang, but Yin. Okay, again I digress. Yin and Yang are the components of the symbol. The actual symbol is called the Tai Chi Ta. That's the two little circles. But at any rate, it's like an interplay, a Tai Chi between the story the cards are telling and how you interpret that, and the intuition that's coming in. And I'm not really good at the intuition thing, and not only am I not good at it, I'm not comfortable with it. But that's just me. You might be more comfortable with it and rely on that more. And so that, again, goes back to the idea of listen to what everyone has to say, but only accept what resonates with you and what works. And then, again, later try other things. And just don't be afraid to try anything new. And the final thing, too, well, I don't know if this should be, unless something else comes to me, but your environment is important. And this is something that, if you want, like me, I like candles, and I've got certain, I call them artifacts. And I always like to light an incense because my incense went out. Because it creates a mood for me. And, other people, well, we'll address this, other people might want to burn sage or do whatever. There's a lot of superstition involved. And I hesitate to use the word superstition because I'm not sure. I don't mean that in a negative context, but sometimes I do, depending on what the superstition is and who's doing it and why. But it just seems to me that you want a comfort zone for yourself. You want familiarity, because when you're familiar, then you have a space that lends itself to discovering. And this is something that I learned today too. I was doing reads at the local Taco Bell, and I just said to myself, I'm not even going to try doing anything intuitive. But I had one read where it just happened. And I felt real comfortable with that because I was out of my comfort zone. I was sitting in bright light, no candles, and just doing reads for free. And not everybody was, was hip to it, So, and the point being, I'm much more comfortable in my own room in dim light and candles, working on that intuitive thing than I am in bright lights at a fast food restaurant. But I think the goal for me anyways, and I think it should be for anyone else, is to get good enough to where you aren't impeded by that. And if you're still learning, then you know what, for learning purposes, always make yourself comfortable. Always be in a comfortable environment. Like I say, what I have on my, aside from candles, I have what I call them artifacts. I didn't want to call them kitsch. But I did a really interesting video about what my table was like back in October. And it's in the archives. If you hunt around for it, you can find it. I might even repost it to this thread if I'm asked, if I can find it. But I want to drive home that the space that you're doing this in is important. And another thing too, ethics. I think ethics are important. I think it's you need to develop a set of ethics as you're learning. And I can't tell you what those ethics are for two reasons. Number one, I'm still learning myself because it's a tricky thing, and I even posted a thread about that. It's kind of died, and maybe it'll resurface. The other thing is you'll have your own set of ethics. I'm always, if someone wants to say, is my boyfriend cheating on me or something like that, well, yeah, I might do a read like that. But if someone says, how is so-and-so doing in his relationship with so-and-so? Or what are these two people doing? Or is this happening? I will tell the person, and I had to do this today, I'm like, well, I'm not really sure how that's any of your business. I mean, so for me, I was uncomfortable with that. And I said, if you want me to do a read on how you are interacting with this person, or what your relationship with this individual is, and something of that nature comes up, fine. But it's, I don't want to, be spying on somebody through tarot for you. And ultimately, for me, tarot is about learning and growth and helping people develop and helping people through hard times and coming through. Don't let anybody push you into screening early before you really have your skill set down. That can wreck your confidence. It wasn't just that the screening didn't go well. It was just, well, I don't want to go into detail or start into a rant. But it really, really blocked my confidence. So someone says, go ahead, try, screen this place, go screen here, no. And my problem was I had a lot of positive feedback, and so I was a little cocky about it. I thought, I'm getting all this positive feedback, and things will be going well. And so it wasn't just that I failed some screens. It was, particularly, the way it happened, too. So what I'm saying is, you definitely want to crawl before you walk, and walk before you run. And this is the hard part. This is where it would be nice. I mean, there are tarot schools out there, and there's probably somebody on every other website who will say they'll mentor you. And it's great if you can find a good mentor. But in my experience, for every one good spiritualist out there, there are about 10 wackos. A lot of people who halfway have it, and those people are dangerous too, because in my experience, there was someone who I won't say I was following them, but I was very intrigued by their method, and she was fairly accurate in the beginning. No one on here is just someone through Facebook, and then it just turned ugly. So if you can find a good mentor, they're worth their weight in gold. But be very, very cautious of who you choose as a mentor. And then rely on that mentor to tell you what you're ready for. Now, this kind of thing that would be a special relationship. So when I say listen to everybody, but only do with what resonates with you, if you were to find a good mentor, someone you trust, then you might want to bend that rule and just, do something they say whether it makes sense or not, if you really trust that person. But that kind of trust doesn't come easy. So this has been, some of my experiences. Like they say, your mileage may vary. I wish you all the luck. There's lots of techniques out there, and I didn't want to discuss technique because there's tons of that kind of information for you. You asked for the kind of information you don't get, or that somebody else, what somebody wish someone would have told them. So hopefully I've addressed things that you're not going